Good morning. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today, Tuesday, the 12th of September, 2023, the second day of World Childless Week 2023. A huge thank you to Steph for allowing us to join World Childless Week and give us an opportunity to highlight the experience today of the childless step parent. My name's Alex Williamson, and I have got a host of panelists here. We're going to spend the next 45 minutes to an hour raising a discussion under the term hidden in plain sight. I've got some really interesting and well-experienced stepmoms here to join me today, and really raising this conversation and really having an active discussion with yourselves and telling our stories that might resonate for you about our own experiences around step parenting and our childlessness as well at the same time. So it's a really warm welcome from all of us. I'm calling in this today from Brighton. I have been a step parent for 11 years. I have been with my partner for 12 years. And during that time, I was lucky enough to have a loving relationship alongside my stepsons, who are now 18 years old and 22 years old. So we went through the teen years together as a step family. And unfortunately, during that time, despite lots of efforts and intentions and real wishing and intention from myself and my partner, we were unable to bring our own biological child into the family, which is something we would have very much loved to have experienced. So I found myself in this kind of unique, uncharted territory of both a step parenting experience, but also the experience of a childless woman. And that really led me to start my own support group for step ladies in Brighton, which I've been running for the past 4 years. So very warm welcome to all of you on the call that are joining us, any members from there and allies as well. I'm going to hand over to Lisa next. Lisa, if you would introduce yourself and give us a quick rundown of your experiences.
So hi, I'm Lisa Cassane. I'm based in Mansfield, which is near Nottinghamshire. I'm a writer, a gardener. I've been living with anxiety for probably most of my adult life. I'm a dog mum and I'm a step mum. I've been a step mum for about 10 years. And like you, Alex, I also went through the teen years with mine. So yeah, that was quite the experience. They're all adults now, and I very recently became a step grandmum as well. So happy to have a little bit of a chat about that if it comes to it. But yeah, that's me.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Lisa. And Jo, over to yourself about your experience.
Hi, I'm Jo Morgan. I've been a stepmom for 12 years. I've got a 15-year-old stepson, so I am in the teen years. I'm a full-time regional manager. My different dynamic is that I'm married to a military man, so we have the added complications of moving around a lot and trying to work that dynamic of being close to his son. We started our journey to try and have our own biological children when my stepson was probably about 3 or 4. And I found that really hard. We went down the IVF route, and there's something very difficult about, you know, having a negative test when you've got a small child in the house that is not yours, you know, doesn't have that loving sort of parent relationship, you know, doesn't come running to me if he needs me, it's running to dad. And my partner was great. He really supported me and would take his son off to give me some space, but what I really needed was my husband with me at the time. So I found those early years of being a childless step parent really, really challenging. So yeah, that's about where I am at the moment.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Jo and Lisa. And just as a reminder, as those of you who are dialing in and listening in, or perhaps watching this later on YouTube, any content that you'd like to put into the chat function today that's open, if you're live on the webinar today, that won't be recorded into the recording that's then later put onto YouTube. That's just for us, for those of us that are live in this call today. So please know that that is a safe place if you would like to let us know if any of these experiences are resonating for you, or if you'd like us to delve a bit deeper into some of those experiences and share with you. Our aim of this webinar today is really to connect and raise the voice of the childless step parent. And for that reason, when I was thinking about this webinar and putting it together, this phrase, hidden in plain sight, really struck out to me as something that I'd heard and something that I really connected with. I'd heard it several times in the support groups, and it's the experience I definitely felt myself, about feeling that kind of duality of being slightly one foot in the parenting and family world, but also at the same time navigating very real losses and very real longings for building a family of my own as well. And the journey and the time that it's taken me to move along that road of acceptance and enjoyment of the family that I have. So we really encourage those of you to be gentle with each other, to let us know by hearts or emojis, whatever way you'd like to communicate with us, if any of these topics are resonating for you and you'd like us to delve a bit further. So let's talk a bit more about hidden in plain sight and what that means for us and what that kind of evoked for you. So I'd love to hear from our panelists. I'd love to hear from you first, Lisa, our very own dog mum. Let's find out, and our very illustrious step grandmother, which I think is a fantastic experience to bring to the table as well. When I mentioned to you the phrase hidden in plain sight, what kind of reaction did you first have, and how do you recognise it against your experiences?
I think the thing that came out for me immediately was that I felt that part of myself was hidden. So I felt that through particularly the early years of getting into the sort of swing of being a stepmom and a family and all of that, I pushed a lot of my personality down. I pushed a lot of myself down, because there was always this fear that anything that I showed to the children would be shared outside of my control, and I couldn't handle that. So what I did instead was I just pushed myself down and I made myself small, and I didn't let the children see me upset or emotional really in any way. I was very, I tried to keep this big wall up in front of me. And looking back now, I kind of regret that. I wish I'd let them in a bit more. I wish I'd been a bit more open. But as you said, Alex, you know, it takes time, doesn't it, to come down this road and figure out where we are. And I'm 10 years on, and now I'm suddenly a step grandma, and I've got this whole new world coming in front of me, and I don't know what I'm doing with it. And it's a complete, I'm one of about 6 grandparents, so it's like, where am I on that scale? I have no idea. So yeah, I'm here, I'm around, I'm always around the children. They, you know, I'm in their life as much as anyone else, but I'm very much hidden from the norm, the things that people expect from families. I don't really see myself as part of that. I feel more like I'm a shadow on the side of the family sometimes.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, over to you, Jo.
Yeah, so hidden in plain sight, and I think it's a really good phrase to use, Alex, because, you know, going through attempting to have my own biological child, you know, you go through all those hormonal issues, you've got everything going on, but you've also got this, you know, we used to see my stepson fortnightly, you know, so every 2 weeks I'd have this child come into my life that I would not really know, have to learn what things are, you know, don't really have the support of my friends, in the sense that I'm not a mummy. I'm not there. I've not been part of those kind of the WhatsApp groups, you know, all my friends who've had their own biological children have got like their NCT group of people that they can go to. And as a step parent, I felt quite isolated in the fact that how do I get advice, especially as my friends have had babies, being emotionally grieving my own losses. I couldn't be part of that. You know, I didn't want to go to like the baby showers and everything. So I found that I almost isolated myself through my childlessness, then prevented me having the ability to have that conversation with my friends in future. And you end up with this dynamic of you're a mum, but you're a stepmum. Don't really want to be a mum because you don't want to get overbearing on someone else's child. I'm very aware that they've got their own biological mum and I'm just another adult to love him, you know. If I say about the military stuff, so with my husband deploying, I would then go through the loss of my husband having to go away for sort of 6-7 months at a time, but I'd also lose my stepson. Access was reduced by the biological mum. I was made to feel very grateful that I was allowed to see him at all, which was tough because he's a child I love and I want to spend time with. So the absolute feeling of having him taken away and not having the support of my husband, I really struggled with at that time. And thank goodness for my family. And actually, you know, Alex, we've known each other for quite a while now, and having you as somebody who understood my situation has been really powerful, actually.
I really agree. I mean, I resonate so much with all the things you've described there. That delicate dance, I felt it through my own journey of holding back the desire to parent, to mother, to play the active role, but really learning the hard way. And I'd say the hard way, I say, because not because it's hard to learn it, but because it takes time to learn it. And I've certainly made many mistakes along the way of knowing my place and my role. And I think there are hundreds of kind of invisible boundaries around step parenting, which you can't overstep, which are really, really difficult to see. And when you're having a great time at a weekend, you know, and you're at the water park and all things are flying, you know, you might forget sometimes that some of those boundaries you can't really step over. There is something there that you can't go past. And so it is very, very difficult. And I think I really resonate with that experience of having one set of experiences going on in my life and then presenting something very different in my scenario, that kind of weekend routine that you've kind of described, Jo. But I was wondering, Lisa, I think I was hearing it from you as well, but I was imagining that the children were with you sort of longer periods of time that you were describing, but yet it still felt the same. Is that the case?
Yeah, so it kind of changed over time, as it does. It started off with more of an every other weekend kind of arrangement, but that didn't really work, and we felt that you know, that was quite an old-fashioned way of doing things. So we pushed and we fought for more, which we got. And it became almost more of a 50-50 situation, but actually over probably about 5 years in their teens, 2 of the children lived with us for at least sort of a period of time. So there were times over the last 10 years, there's been times where my house has been just me and my husband. Sometimes it's me, my husband, and loads of kids. Sometimes it's just me, and it's quite unpredictable, because when, sorry, I'm jumping about a bit here, but when my youngest stepson came to live with us first time, it was very much a reaction to what was going on in his life. And you know, I'm not the sort of person that could ever turn a child away. So I was like, okay, yeah, of course you can come live here, but we need to figure out how on earth this is going to work, because
the dynamic, isn't it?
This is crazy. Like, you know, I came from being a single 20-something living in London, just sort of living my best life, to suddenly I'm 30 and now I'm a stepmom to some teenage children. Like, how has this happened to me? But, you know, as you say, Alex, it comes with so much joy as well. And I'm so grateful for that as well. Yeah, sorry, I've gone a bit off topic, haven't I?
No, thank you for that reminder, Lisa. You haven't gone off topic at all, actually, for me, because I think that's absolutely true. And I think that permission to parent, that permission to love, that permission to fill that space is really, really challenging for a woman who's experiencing childlessness, going through that journey, perhaps coming to terms with accepting that is going to be the outcome for them and their partner. And that's incredibly difficult. And I felt at many times guilty, ashamed of feeling that way when there were 2 vibrant young boys in my house playing Assassin's Creed, pirate games, you know, and I really wrestled inside myself quite brutally sometimes about those feelings, but they are very different experiences. And there isn't a place within the family parenting experience for the stepmother's voice and for their experience, which is much more complicated and much more longer term, which is that gradual getting to know your stepchildren, getting to understand the dynamic, handle this constant changing of dynamic that we've each described, whether that's the routine, the ages, the loyalties. I know in the write-up for this, we talked about lopsided loyalties and that feeling within the home of like, which camp am I in? Who am I in with? Who am I out with right now? Who am I protecting? It's so difficult. And that, coupled with a very personal journey that you and your partner may be going through, is really, really difficult to navigate and makes that isolation that we already feel through childless journey that we're having, because that is a very secretive process. It's not something that you declare at work. It's not something, you know, you may tell family and a couple of friends, but certainly if the journey becomes more complicated along the way, if that's part of your story, you may start to close that circle in, and it may be a very small circle that you're sharing that with towards the end. But that isolation that you're feeling is then compounded by this unseen role that we're playing as our stepmother. to our stepchildren and to our parents' children, because our partners' children, because our love for them and our will to get this right and our strong passion to be the best stepmoms we can be is born from that attraction and that love for our partner, which is a really unique thing as well. We are doing it in some ways at the beginning for them. I experienced later it became a journey for myself as well, but the initial part of it, I think I really went in with a lot of gusto, a lot of hope, a lot of I can do this, I like kids, you know. And it became much more complicated through that.
I think I agree with you, Alex, in the sense that you know, I had sort of a 3-year-old come into my life, and I was quite excited being a childless woman, you know, that there's that sort of, okay, this is an opportunity to have a mothering side and feel like I've got it, but actually it's really not the same, you know. Support, the isolation is quite key. Actually, when my stepson was sort of about 8 or 9, we were in a family group party with some of my friends, and one of my friends turned around and said, "Oh, isn't it amazing? We've all got girls like this." And I went, "What about William?" And she actually said, bless her, she didn't realise, she goes, "He doesn't count." And I was like, how can you say he doesn't count? Like, you know him as part of your life, you know. Would they have said that about an adopted child or a fostered child, you know? And actually having a stepson changed my mind about having an adopted child in my life. Actually, I found that I'd already adopted a son, and the thought of actually the challenges that was bringing to me made me question and worry about whether I would have an adopted child in my life. Not that that's always a solution to being childless. I think that's often thrown at us. I know, Alex, when we first met, we ended up going, we were in a group of childless women, and we were perceived as lucky that we had a child in our lives. And I think we both found that quite, don't know if lucky's the right word, you know. We're fortunate to have someone to love, but yeah.
It is. Thank you, Jo. Thank you. I'll just take a pause after that, because you've shared something really personal there as well. So thank you. And I think you're absolutely right that there is that feeling of around that childlessness, that you might be experiencing that grief journey and that coming to terms with that acceptance of that loss or what might not be. And then almost I found myself in some ways, and this in no way was my stepchildren's fault, they were completely innocent within that, but then I find myself embroiled in family activities which felt like the human embodiment of what I wasn't able to have myself or generate myself. And I think that is a really unique experience for the childless grieving woman, to then be embroiled in that extra parental and family experience. Yes, it brings the joys to it, and that's something you come to learn later, and I think we've all mentioned that in this call, that it's there definitely, but it's along the way, it's an incredibly complex layer that's added in to that grieving process, which in my personal experience, I think made my grieving process much slower. It did add some joys to it, but it made it much slower, and I felt a lot of stigma and shame around it until I started to connect with other childless stepmoms. So this brings me on to another topic and theme that I hear quite regularly across our conversation with childless stepmoms, and it's even in the phrase the childless stepmom. I've heard it described sometimes as the last thing anyone would want to be described of, as an identity that no one would want, as something that sounds already quite pitiful at the start. And I think it's really important to talk about the kind of poverty that we have currently around language, labels, and identity, which make these sense of belonging and sense of being seen so incredibly difficult for us to navigate when there doesn't feel like there's great language around it. And I'd love to ask the panel of any experiences they wanted to share around around language and around that use, that identity, and that struggles with identity.
I actually have quite a strong opinion on the use of the word stepmom,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like, you might remember when I did my intro, it was not the first thing I said, because I feel like it really doesn't sum up what I am, not at all. It has this word mum in it, and I'm nobody's mum, and I never will be. So I reject that part of the word. But then I was
Great.
sort of walking around my house earlier, and I found something that my stepchildren had bought me one Christmas, and it's just this gorgeous poem, and it says stepmom in lovely gold cursive at the top, and it says, you know, thank you for sort of coming into my life and stuff like that. And I got quite emotional because I thought, that's what I am to them, and I'm so grateful for that. I'm so glad that they can see me that way, but I'm not anyone's mum. And I feel like that word just doesn't do it justice. And like you say, it almost, it puts a caveat on the mum word and makes it less. And so I try not to use that, but I recognise the need for that label to exist, because otherwise, what am I? I'm just Lisa, and that's nothing.
Hey, that's not
in the most positive way, of course.
Roll that back, Lisa.
Yeah. Okay, I take that one back.
Yeah, thank you. We'll not take that in this webinar today. Jo, what's been your experience around language?
Yeah, so I think I absolutely hear you, Lisa. It's a massive thing, that stepmum, you know, and the amount of times my stepson would turn around, because we have the same surname, but he doesn't have the same surname as his biological mum. So if we went places, especially on flying abroad on holidays, oh, is your mum? She's not my mum, you know, and you're like, just like, it's a little dagger in your heart. Kind of like absolutely kills you. But definitely. I think one of my first memories was me getting all excited. I bought some bedtime reading books. I was going to sit, you know, the bedtime routine. I was getting excited. And then you suddenly realise how much the Disney world has portrayed us as we're going to kill them, you know, abandon them, make them sleep forever, poison them with apples.
Put them in a shed.
Put them in a shed. Yeah, you know, there was never any... I've never found a book that has us in a positive light. And, you know, so the minute you hear stepmother, that you see the evil Disney world going through, which I think is really sad to see and hear.
Through time, that archetype really gave us a snapshot of society's impression of the role of the stepmom, and how and it's quite different for stepmoms, I would say, as well. I think there's quite a different message around a stepdad is almost could be considered a hero, yet stepmom is that kind of archetype which is a threat to resource. It has a sort of sinister intentions, and again, that's society's using those archetypes really to keep us in our places, because step parenting and the need for step parent has existed throughout time, certainly when mortality rates were lower. You know, as blended families have existed right through all social classes and right through our history and time. So we're incredibly needed within society, yet for some reason society still is giving us language which has that kind of threatening aspect to it, as if we were an absolute threat to resource, a threat to the biological family, a threat to the sanctity of the biological mum. And it's, in my view, a huge oversight. I mean, I too have experienced what you've described, people in a shop, people at the airport getting it slightly wrong, and that kind of look that you might exchange with your stepchild where you think, oh yeah, we know this before. But it made me very saddened to have to take on the moniker stepmom, because I felt I was really disowning them in that moment. I was taking a step apart as well, which isn't really how I was wanting to be. I was wanting to connect and step forward. I know that in the States there is language around bonus mom, there is different language. I've yet to find one I really like. I'd love to hear in the chat function there if any of you out there have really settled with something that you've really enjoyed as a name, as a label. And of course, our primary label and identity is Alex, Lisa, Jo. You know, these are the women that we are. And I've tried to think many times about how to describe my experience and not describe it as the childless step parent, but actually the woman who found herself in a step parenting role that was unable to bring their own biological children into that family setting. That's such a mouthful. I mean, that doesn't roll off the tongue.
Not at all.
But, you
Not
know,
so dynamic, is it?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that will work at the start of every meeting. But, you know, I really would love to hear as well. As you can see, we've got lots of people dialing in from all over the world on this call today, which is amazing. And I'd love to know more a bit about any of those words that you found comfortable or experiences that you've found comfortable.
Let me have a read out, Alex. Let me have a look. So we've got bonus mum. Haven't heard that before. That's quite good.
No, you like it.
Oh, someone would like us to expand on lopsided loyalties. I think we could talk a bit about lopsided loyalties.
We absolutely will. We'll circle back to it in the Q&A. Thank you. I love to talk about lopsided loyalties. And I think I love that phrase, talking of language, that I've, I don't know if I invented that term, but it's certainly one that rung forward for me. So we had a chat through.
My stepmom went, my stepson started calling me extra super mum, which made my heart sing, you know, so it's kind of a little special thing that I just say, maybe don't say that to your mum, but it's quite nice to hear it from me.
Brilliant. I love that, Jo. Yeah. Brilliant. So we've had a chat through about our experiences, our sense of duality hidden in plain sight, experiencing childlessness, yet at the same time in family settings. We've talked about our language and experiences. I wonder how you found this lack of permission for us to have information and support from the parenting world, how that might have impacted your own parenting skills or your ability to be a stepmother. I'd love to hear if you've any thoughts on that with the panel.
Jo, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I'll go for that. So I think, go back to sort of the mum groups, you know, the WhatsApp groups in this day and age has been very isolating. I'm not invited to them. I'm not part of it, even though, you know, I drop him and pick him up at school. I'm not known in the playground to drop him off. The teachers don't know me because I don't go to the parents' evening, because that would just be, I mean, awkward and beyond belief. But, you know, but I still want to know. I want to know how he's developing, what's happening, how he's enjoying his life. Especially when he's very young, the lack of communication from the biological mum about stuff he'd done, what he was doing. You know, children change their likes of what they like and stuff. So being a weekend, every other weekend mum, stepmum, I found that I would have to buy in food and get his favourite food, but by the time he came again, it wasn't what he liked anymore. And that felt really hurtful. I found that a struggle to try and sort of get that mothering role and be able to look after him without having the information provided to me.
I really hear you, Jo, and I too experienced, and I think I hear it quite often through women who are childless and are step parenting, that I really struggle to get my parenting style up and running and to get into my stride. You are part of a complex communication network to know what's best for your stepchildren. And as you say, they're navigating, they're changing quickly, they're evolving all the time. And you're just about catching up in one area, and then there might be a gap till you see them again, and you find yourself really, really, adrift again about how you might find that parenting style. And I wish that I had been able to develop a bit better that parenting style. And I envied sometimes my partner's role and the kind of ease with which they fell in and out and, you know, could kind of experience their relationship. And I felt much more cautious about the way I had to do that. I'm glad I did, because I think longer term, that sort of caution, I hope, is going to stand our relationships in good stead. That is my hope at this stage. I don't know whether that's the case or not. But I really concur with you about not finding my parenting style very easily.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a lot of shame around that and thinking, oh, I know, you're testing out things really, but without the sort of run up to them when you meet them, because you either meet them as fully formed children with opinions, or maybe they're very young children, but they've had that very close bond with their immediate biological mum and dad to early on. And yeah, you're just in that really difficult zone, really. You can't go to the parenting websites because that's not your area. And you can't go to the childless websites because there's nothing there about parenting.
And also, childless women, we've kind of isolated ourselves from our friends who are mums because we didn't want to be so involved. So therefore you feel a bit rude. I didn't involve myself in your troubles when they were young for you, but now I want help. So you feel,
that's right.
It feels rude to try and sort of then go, can you help me?
That's right. Often that space is very triggering when you're going through your own journey of not being able to have a child. You're absolutely right. So we keep ourselves a little bit isolated and a little bit further away. There's some great information coming into the chat, I can see. So thank you very much for everyone who's sharing in there. We will take a moment to read some more of those. We won't read them out loud just yet, but we will come back to them. So that's brilliant. Thank you. So some of what we've been describing here as well, before we kind of move into taking questions, has been a bit about the longer term view and the kind of longer term formation of blended families. And I guess if there are any very new childless stepmoms at the beginning of their journey in this, listening in today or watching back later, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. We've got a wealth of experience around the panel here of 10 years, 11 years, 12 years going forward. And we've known that there is some information around blended families taking 5 to 7 years to feel fully formed. And there are different stages within that process that we all go through. And I'm just wondering where we might feel we're up to now, or what we might have told our younger selves. Our younger selves when we started step parenting. I don't know if you have any advice that you would have loved to have heard from them.
When I became a stepmom 10 years ago, I was working as a social worker. So I was working with teenagers down in London, a lot of kind of gang, like youth violence, that sort of thing. So I was well into sort of child development and working with children and knowing what was right for children. And I met my husband and we started this dynamic, and very quickly I started getting told to stay in my lane, and that phrase triggers me quite a lot because my lane at that time was a qualified social worker with many years experience of working with children who had been in very difficult situations. And I came into this world and there were these children who were struggling because their parents had gone through a really horrible divorce. They were being pushed and pulled from mum to dad and all of the usual things that we all know about when it comes to step family dynamics. But there was me with all this academic understanding and research, just being told to just stay out of it, stay in your lane, you don't know what you're talking about. And I'm there going, I know what I'm talking about, I know about children and I know about how their minds are working. And like, so their mum would occasionally say to them things like, oh, you're being spoiled, or you're manipulating the situation. And all I could think of was, no, they're just learning to survive in their environment. They are learning how to get what they want, because that's what kids do, but just to survive in this crazy chaos that they have been thrust into without any choice of their own. And then suddenly there's this new woman in their house, and there was a stepdad as well, so it wasn't just us. But the poor kids at the bottom of it were being just sort of dragged all over the place, and I was trying to be the calm in the storm while also dealing with my own anxiety and really struggling with that and the fact that we couldn't have children. So yeah, I think the advice that would come from that is talking to my partner. We talked loads. In fact, we had one little routine where whenever things got particularly difficult at home, we would actively go out and we would go to McDonald's, get a coffee, sit on a hill in a park that was near us. But we would make sure that we took that negative energy and all of that horrible stuff and took it out of our home, and we would go and have those conversations in the park or wherever, and then come back to our home and our sanctuary. Because sometimes, a lot of the time, it didn't feel like that's what home was for me, because there was always someone else's opinion in the house and needs. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. I love that idea. I can imagine you on the hilltop, those really candid conversations in those moments.
It made such a difference just taking it out of home. That was
well, you're so right to bring us back to that really important role, which is the partnership at the beginning, and the very thing, the glue that's going to hold this whole thing together as well. Not only your experiences, of course, your own grief, your own issues, your own needs, but also your partners within that, your stepchildren's, and of course their biological mother. It's a very complex world, that of the blended family, definitely.
Huge.
What about for yourself, Jo? That sort of longer term view or message to your young yourself?
So I think mine would be to probably be a bit more honest with myself and my friends with regards how hard it was. And actually being honest with my stepson a bit more about, you know, I find this hard, the dynamic of, and I've done that now he's older. I've had some really frank conversations with, you know, 15-year-old. And he's like, he goes, he sort of almost reassured me, he goes, you've done a great job. And, you know, that's lovely to hear. And maybe if I'd said something earlier, I would have got that earlier. But you kind of doubt everything going through. I felt very aware when he was a small child that, you know, was it my place to bath him? Was it my place to, like, you know, get him ready for bed and dress him? And as he got older, I found that even harder, and sort of felt there was a line that I shouldn't cross. And making sure he has time with his dad, even though I want to spend time with him as well. I think it's important that dad and son had their own time together. But with the selfishness of me being involved with that, I have to say it has got easier now that he's older and can converse with me. I think in the younger days, children tend to be more bonded to mum and more run to mum when there's a problem. So if he was sick with us, it wasn't me he wanted, it wasn't really his dad he wanted either. And that's quite isolating with that part. So, but definitely it's getting easier. It's more enjoyable. I'm being able to have a bit more fun. And I feel like I'm almost coming into my own now that he's older. And I see that sort of going forward. So I was just going to add, you know, that it's the whole dynamic of my family as well. You know, my mum being able to have a stepchild involved in her life as well, that she sees even less because she's not biologically related. And there's all those parts to sort of getting this blended family together.
Extended family and blended family life, I feel like, is a whole new other webinar in itself because that is definitely a very interesting thing, and I'm hugely grateful to my extended family for the support they've shown myself and my partner and my stepchildren of embracing us and supporting us along the way. And I absolutely I really resonate and concur with some of the things you said there. I think if I had messages for my younger self, it might be a bit around enjoying those earlier years a little bit more. I think you might have mentioned this too, Lisa, on the call. Like, I wish that I hadn't held back in some ways. I wish I had been more confident. Again, it's because of the isolation that I was experiencing as a childless step parent, and that lack of identity, that lack of permission to do the mothering, that those lines I couldn't cross, that I was so cautious around. For myself as well, I'd love to add that I'm a stepdaughter. So for myself, I had an experience too within my own home about becoming and joining a blended family, and the experience of my amazing stepmom and my stepsister joining our family when I was younger. And I really kind of never knew then what I was learning while I was watching her navigate step parenting. I don't think step parenting me and my sister was always very easy. And I really saw the kind of super skills early on. Little did I know I was going to, use those skills as well. But what incredible wisdoms she was able to pass on to me in that moment, because really I saw the challenge from a different perspective. I then later found myself in that role, and of course brought a whole new world of appreciation to what she had done. And there was an experience I had with her which made me really turn my head and really get angry about how society wasn't valuing the role that we have to play. And they're incredibly fortunate, I think, to have childless step parents in their lives for many reasons. We don't bring our own children into the mix to add. That's a whole different dynamic, and that's a whole different set of complications of getting those siblings to move towards each other as well. But it's that lack of appreciation of the village that it takes to raise a child. And you've named it just right as well, Jo, when you talk about the teenage years and the ability and the opportunity that we have as these, I don't want to say one step removed, but as this dynamic is in a slightly different position that we hold to the biological parents. I found, especially in the teen years, was incredibly valuable to kind of meet them as they are, without all of that history and dynamic that they bring along with their biological family, and that in the teen years that was incredibly powerful for them to kind of be regarded in that way and not be regarded as the young child that always did this, or all those kind of labels that we can have within a family. So when I myself experienced an illness, and I was going through at the time a cancer diagnosis, and my stepmom really stepped forward for me in a way that was incredible, to be there for me in a way which, when I reflected after, though my loving mum would have wanted to be there for me too, my stepmom was able to fulfill a role for me during that period that was quite different. She fulfilled it in some of the practical ways. She kind of had the money for the hospital, the magazines, the different things. But our relationship was such, it had a closeness that we'd built over the years and that we'd worked on over the years. But it wasn't tied in with those slightly heavier dynamics that can be with your parent, your biological parent. And I really saw that there, and I thought, wow, I didn't expect that this support was going to come from this source in this way, but you have shown me how a woman, a stepmom, can stand by my side alongside a really difficult journey, which would be hard to watch anybody going through, and absolutely hold your own in it. So I absolutely applaud the contribution she made to me there, and my biological family, who of course were concerned and there for me too. I think I express on their behalf a huge amount of gratitude of the way the step-parent role served me in that moment so hugely, to be that kind of different support and to see me as the adult I was going through this experience. And that switched a light on for me about my own stepmothering role and made me think, hold on, I've got something really unique to give here, and I need to start appreciating it myself while I let society catch up with me. And I need to start being proud of everything that I have to offer and honouring it and really putting it at the forefront and not dampening it down, as we've sometimes heard society describe for us, this hidden part of myself, but actually embracing it, that auntie energy, that godmother energy, that stepmother energy, but without those negative connotations around it. That's there, the support, and the biological parents need it too. I mean, we're seeing it ourselves coming into partnership with our partners, how that dynamic changes from when they've been single parenting to then start parenting with us as well. So it's really interesting, and I think that overemphasis on the nuclear family has been hugely damaging for that sanctity around that has been hugely damaging in this kind of culture, because that's not the truth. That's not the truth in all cultures, but it's really, really important. So I'd love to hear more from that in the chat as well, if it's resonated for anybody.
I was going to just Alex,
can we try and tackle some questions? We're at 1:45. Love to. So lopsided loyalties, you mentioned, Joe, came up a little bit earlier.
Lopsided loyalties. Can we talk a bit more about that? I'm sure we can.
Absolutely. Well, it's the ties that bind. It's the lopsided loyalties. I don't know if I've ever described this, but it's absolutely, tell us in the chat if you've ever had this feeling. And Lisa, I think you've got a little smile that tells me you might have a feeling around this as well. But it's definitely around that. For my example, I had 2 stepsons in the house. So that is one set of loyalties, the brothers to each other, the brothers with their dad, the brothers back to their mum, my partner to his birth partner who he had the children with originally, myself with my partner. But then can you see how this dynamic is never stable? It's constantly moving and shifting, and it's often made up of 3s in my scenario. So it feels quite a triangle that can feel quite volatile, that we could psychologically assess, and several different journeys go around in them at different times. But it was this sense of forming as a unit, but that loyalty being quite a quicksand that actually could change and morph quite quickly. And that was something that I would have loved. And I think I felt that having my own child, I don't know if this is true or not, would have brought me the security of a loyalty all of my own. That's not a given, but I think maybe that's sometimes the fantasy we might have in our minds about what a biological child will do for our sense of self and our sense of place in the world. But I think, Alex, for anyone else?
I was going to say, Alex, I think that's absolutely true, because the phrase that we're always told is, you don't know what love is until you hold that baby in your arms. And we get told that all the time. Now, I totally disagree. When I had my puppy, it was the same feeling. That's what I'm going to say. Absolutely love my fur baby, and she is my world. But it is a conversation that is physically said to us. You don't know love until you've had your own child. And that's a really cutting phrase to say to somebody who doesn't have or cannot have their own children.
And it really puts a bubble around this other love that's impenetrable, that's so unique, it can't be shared or something.
Yes.
I don't think that's true either.
Agreed.
So I don't think that's a winner for either side. What are your thoughts, Lisa?
I think for me, I love that phrase, lopsided loyalties. When you first showed it to me, I just thought it described it so well. But similar to you, I'm struggling to actually put that into words. So I think for me, the loyalties that are sort of all over the place are the loyalties to myself and my own mental health. I've had struggles with my mental health for as long as I've been alive, pretty much, and particularly when we were going through the infertility part of our journey, I was in a pretty bad place, and I would have to very regularly put that aside, put it in a box, and deal with the fact that there were children in my house that needed looking after, and there were lots of other things that I won't go into too much, but it was a very difficult time. So I would have to push my own loyalties to myself down in order to put the children at the top of the priority list when they were with us. And it was a juggling act, because my mental health was all over the place. I would wait for little pockets of calm where I could go and silently cry somewhere, just in order to get it out of my system, because I couldn't do that in front of the children. So yeah, I think for me, lopsided loyalties means not knowing who to put first.
Yeah.
That's
and
great.
Normally it's
Thank
not
you for
us.
that reminder. Yeah, that's really important. Thank you. Let's see if we can pop through another question or request that's come through. What can we
There's
see?
one here.
We don't read anything identifiable to maintain confidentiality, but just the question that
There's one here. It says, is it easier with later teens or older children who've left home?
Oh, good question. Well, I'll pass this one to Lisa a second. You've got probably the oldest ones in the room, but I will say, I think that our young people are redefining when they leave the nest now. I don't think it's such a given that you're counting down to 18 and then suddenly you're going to be, I don't know if that was ever the case, but, certainly there was a more sort of well-trodden path around that later. I mean, I met my stepsons when they were 8 and 11 years old. So one of them was just on the cusp of kind of secondary school and entering that big hormonal tunnel that they start to head down. And it did take me definitely longer to connect with him, I think, for a variety of reasons, but partly because that is a very insular time. That hormonal teen time is very inward looking. So, and boys, maybe I struggled. I remember thinking, I wish they were girls, but actually probably I'm not sure how it would have been with teen girls. But so what do you reckon, Lisa? Older teens, what does it matter to the age group?
I think that there's this whole misconception with teenagers and adolescents that they're just awful and they're horrible and they're going to make your life hell. And I was certainly that teenager. I don't know about anyone else, but I was awful as a teenager. And I think that experience of my own really made me recognize, and my social work and the work I was doing at the time made me realize, that teenagers, they just really need a lot of support. And it's not the same as with a little child where you can give them a hug and kiss their scraped knee or whatever. Teenagers need just something else. They need to know that they have a place in the world. They need to know that they have a voice. And if they're being told in many places, schools for example, that they should just shut up and be quiet, then that's not a nice situation for a teenager to be in. And teenagers have this, it's a similar thing to when you're about 2 or 3 years old. You have this idea that you're the center of the universe, and we joke about it, don't we? We joke about teenagers being really selfish and all of this stuff, but that's actual biology. They are going through that. They do not understand, their brains haven't formed yet to understand that there's people with feelings around them. They live in their own little bubble. And I think as soon as I sort of recognized that and understood that, I was able to go, okay, this is teenage behavior. This is not because I'm their stepmom. This is not because of any of those dynamics that I feel really sensitive about. This is because of their hormones and their teenageness. And now that they're so I've got my stepdaughter's just about to be 18 next year and my stepson's 21. And I feel like probably since they were about 15, 16, slowly started to show more of myself, and slowly started to have a relationship with them that's more of a peer relationship rather than like a parent-child one.
Yes.
And
what a gift.
yeah, no, totally. And I spoke to my stepson about they knew we were trying for a baby, and they knew that it obviously never happened, but we've never really spoken about it any more deeply than that. And then when my stepson found out they were having a child, I'm gonna get emotional here, they were having a baby, and they came to me, and it was just a coincidence that my husband wasn't in the house when they came over. So they came, and they both had this little sort of smile in their eyes, and I said, what's going on, what's happening? And they pulled the pregnancy test out of the pocket, and inside everything just dropped. I wasn't completely surprised because I knew that they'd been trying and that sort of stuff, so it wasn't a total surprise, but everything dropped. But then I was just completely overwhelmed that even though their dad wasn't here, they couldn't keep that in, they couldn't keep that to themselves, and they felt that they had to share it with me. And I think that moment, more than any other, showed me that I matter to them.
Yes.
And that really makes me feel pretty amazing.
They who they turn to share that news with. Well done, Lisa. Thank you for sharing that. And that's that incredible journey, painful journey that you've gone along and stuck with all those years to reach that point with them. And it's great that you bring that step grandmother question. I know it's come up in the chat as well, that step grandmother and concept into the room today as well, because it's such an interesting one. And I'm done with feeling that these are inferior relationships. These are really powerful and strong relationships. The grandparent to children relationships, we can see easily how strong they are. Why wouldn't stepmother, step-grandmother relationships be any different as well? So really important. Thank you.
Just on that step-grandmother thing, so I'm just going to say one more thing. So I'm quite lucky in that I come from a different part of the country than my stepchildren. So we have different words for grandma. So their biological the biological grandparents will be all the traditional Nottingham words that you use, but I get to have my own word, which is nan, and that's something we said in London, but they don't use it up here. They don't recognise that word, so I feel really, really lucky that I get my very own word.
I love it. You've earned it. You deserve it. Thank you. Have we got another question in there, Joe or Lisa?
Let's have a look.
I think someone's mentioned about sorry, go on, Joe.
No, Lisa, go.
I was just going to say, someone's mentioned about the charity adverts and things where people start sentences with "as a mother," and it's that whole idea that unless you're a mother or unless you're a parent, you don't know how to empathise with people. And Lindsay, I totally agree with what you're saying there. It drives me crazy too.
Yeah. Have you witnessed any lack of empathy or here in the webinar today? No, I don't think so. We haven't grown a second head or a stone heart yet. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
that links with the Mother's Days. Like you are, sometimes you have them for the Mother's Day, sometimes you don't, and then it's a case of feel like buying yourself your own card to go, I'm a mum today. And then if your partner would often not do something for me, and then it was like, okay, that's okay. And then, he'd have to obviously call his own biological mum to go through and have all that excitement, and kind of would some years be remembered and some years get forgotten, and kind of found that really tough, until one day he was at school and we had him for that weekend, and he'd made a Mother's Day card at school and thought of me rather than mum. And so that made it really good. So normally he would bring something home to take to mum, but this time it was something he brought home to give to me. And that, little memories like that make you go, they do think of us. They do.
And those memories matter so much to us because we don't get them as a given.
No.
There's no expectation of that. That is purely the child's choice to do that. And that feels so special.
It feels really special. Such a good point you've raised there. That is absolutely their choice. That is the work that we've put in with that relationship, and the kids as well. I'd say the kids have met me too in that relationship. And we've kind of reached an understanding of how far each one of us can go. So yeah, really important. Let's see if we've got another question we can get through in that chat box. What's in there? Lots of really great comments. Thank you so much, everyone, for pitching in today. So great to have so many of you here.
Someone's made a comment about you feel like you're playing house. I kind of agree with that. You set up activities. One of my biggest things was I used to get excited to be, right, we're going to go to this adventure park, we're going to go here. And then you take them there and they go, I've already been here. I've done that with mum. And you kind of feel, it just crushes you, because you're just like, you feel like you're playing house. Like, this weekend, we're going to go off and here and go and do that. And I always used to find that quite crushing when they'd be like, I've already done the zoo there, I've already seen that. So yeah.
Do you think that we're finding these experiences more crushing because of our own childlessness experience? Yeah. Or do you think that all stepmoms are finding it? I'm keen to bring it back to this unique experience. So what's your thoughts? Do you think, Jo, it's true?
Yeah, I do.
It stings more?
As a childless, you don't ever get to do that with your own child and plan those activities and birthdays and first day at school. That's never your right. So even though I've got a stepson, I never get to do the first day of school because he's always with mum during the week. So it's those little moments that you are never going to experience yourself or take responsibility. I want to be able to do that and do all those things. Plan the birthday parties.
Yeah, I do recall my younger stepson. At a time, we were right in the thick of our journey, our fertility journey, and it wasn't going well at all. And I was seeing the end coming, really. Well, I could see where this was going to end up. It was starting to feel extremely futile. And he was starting secondary school, and he was at our house, unusually to start secondary school kind of on the Monday. And I could hear them downstairs, and I thought, I'm getting up, even though I had not an ounce of my body that could peel off my bed at that point. I was in such a low state. And I thought, I'm experiencing this first day of secondary school because he's the youngest. This is the last time we're going to go through this experience. And it was starting to accept that wasn't going to be happening for me. So therefore, I better get on board with these experiences and lean into them in a way that was possible, in a way that was kind, leaning in sometimes, leaning back. I wasn't always able to do that. And I don't want anyone to feel it as a pressure to do that. But sometimes I felt that very experience, and I wanted to walk the furthest away, but actually lean into those responsibilities, and that family experience has actually really helped me move through a lot of feelings and has helped me reconnect with them, which in turn has made it then easier to cohabit and to build that bond and to be together.
Yeah, I hear you.
So we're getting really near the end of our time, and I wonder if there's one quick question. Yeah,
Alex, sorry, I just want to address, there's a couple of people in the chat that are talking about how their experiences with birth family, birth mother particularly, have been really difficult. And I just wanted to say, it's not something I generally talk about publicly because it's very, very sensitive, but I've also been through the very difficult situations with the bio mum. And I think you have as well, Jo. So although I talk quite positively about my relationship with the children, that is purely about the children. That's not about all the rest of the stuff that comes with it, because yes, that has been hell. And there were times where I thought it was going to be too much and I wouldn't be able to stick it out. But actually, I always bring the kids to the forefront of my mind, and I think what's right for them. And even when when it feels like they're parroting their mum or their dad or whichever parent is the one that's not with you, when it feels like the children are coming along and throwing all this hate at you, it's really not them. It's just not the kid. No. We need to stop blaming children for things like that, because those words and that energy is coming from the other home that they live in, and you need to be able to separate that and recognize that that's what that is, because otherwise you can end up feeling resentment towards the kids, and that's not good for anyone. So I just wanted to address that. I'd really like to go into more about it, but it's a bit too sensitive. So.
No, you're absolutely right. The complications, we won't speak further about it now. The complications are around blended families and very public forums. So therefore it is really complicated, as we've described already. There's a lot of people involved in these relationships, and a lot of people with a lot of different standpoints, which they all could feel very justified in. And this is in no way a judgment about any of that. But it brings me to a really important point, Lisa, to finish this call on, which is around finding your tribe and finding safe places where you can talk about these things and you can get resourced. And while we don't fit in the family, we don't fit in the traditional family forums there, and we don't fit necessarily in the childless forums, though Steph has given us such an amazing platform today to recognize our experiences and to take us out from being hidden in plain sight. It's really, really important that you do find connection and you do find identity with others going through similar experiences, and that will be a game changer for you. I guarantee it, having lived that experience myself. You finding the right spaces that you trust and that are correct for you. You must reach out. So our request as we come to the end of this call is that you keep this conversation alive. We ask you to go forward positively about the blended family conversation. We are all our best experts about our own blended families. Our experiences are hugely unique, and we are our own best experts about what to do within that. And please resource yourself whichever way you would like. There are lots of resources that you can read about on the website for World Childless Week as well. You'll find all kinds of connections and signposting to different groups. And know that you'd be very welcomed there. And know that you're not alone. Look at all the people here pouring into the chat today and discussing this and touching on this very, very sensitive and very, very personal experiences. So really, really hugely important. We thank you so much for everybody who shared on this call today. We really know the guts and the courage that it takes to come forward and the need that there is. And I can promise you there's something that we do when I run my support groups, which is called Saying the Unsayable, which is just an unburdening of all the things that you've been holding back from saying and that you can't say in a family forum or a childless forum easily because they might not get it, they might not understand, there being those different perspectives, and that's hugely important. And I just would place with you an exercise to take away with you after this call today before we sign off, which is just around spending a moment with yourself at the end of this call. We've talked about lots and lots of subjects, we've unearthed them, we counted our own experiences, put lots of questions and thoughts out there with you. And I would just encourage you to spend some time just letting them filter back down and through and land within you and go into that soft internal place that you have been going on, those very personal journeys around your childless journey. And I would just encourage you to go back gently and revisit in there and recall the people that you've seen today in the chat box, the people that you've seen on the screen today in the panel representing all different facets of childless step parenting. And you give yourself a huge dose of gratitude. And my request for you, my invitation for you is at the end of this call to spend that quiet time with yourself. And please look into, and I'd love to hear, I guess we could put it onto the Facebook groups or wherever we can find a forum after this webinar, to just express our gratitude for ourselves, for our experiences, for the amazing efforts we've done, for doing the very best we can, navigating two really difficult experiences, your childless grief journey alongside a step parenting and family journey. So I really encourage you to honour yourselves and to think really hard about that and to give yourself daily some gratitude and some respect and some props for what's going on. And that can be as small as, sometimes I've thought about it and I thought, I'm just so grateful that I got to do baked beans on toast and pirate games and stuff like that with my stepchildren. That was a hugely wonderful experience. And sometimes I might just be expressing my gratitude for myself for having the courage to show up for something like this and inform myself and know more. So with that, we come to an end.
I'm gonna give another add-on. Sorry, I just want to say that as much as yes, absolutely agree with you, Alex, about that we need to recognise those great things that we're doing. We also need to forgive ourselves when things don't go so well, because as step parents, we can be so self-critical. I still have a memory of when my stepson was 10 and I accidentally called his mum an idiot to him, and I still think about that now 10 years later because I felt so guilty about it. So yeah, give yourselves a break. It's not easy.
Yeah. Thank you. It's that gratitude, that self-love, that respect around we're doing the best we can here, and we'll be getting it right, we'll be getting it wrong sometimes, but there's a long-term game here, there's a long-term relationship that we're working on, so anything is possible. And most importantly as well, to return to yourself, like you've mentioned, the lopsided loyalty to yourself and that of your partner as well. So thank you so much for that final comment, Lisa. Is there anything you'd like to say, Jo, as we wrap up?
Just absolutely, you really need to remember the gratitude for the little moments and keep them. I've still got some little handwritten notes that I've got in my bedside drawer that he left me around the house, as just little things he said over the years, which, you know, to reflect back on, I'm really proud that he's written those to me without prompting. So yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much. So with this, we end our webinar for today for Childless Step Parent Day on World Childless Week 2023. We've been hugely honoured to be here and share this time with yourselves as well. Great to see lots more warrior stepmoms out there and our allies as well, supporting us and extended family. So wishing you all the very best for the rest of this week. Enjoy the rest of the offerings that Steph has for you this week. And yeah, go well, and we'll see you again soon, perhaps in another time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Steph.
Bye. Bye. Bye.